Have you ever had that moment when someone thinks they've won, but you're holding all the cards? When I heard my husband Ryan call me worthless at his family's dinner, I didn't cry or fight back. I simply smiled, walked out, and drove away. In the Aston Martin Vantage he'd been dreaming about for years. The look on his face in my rearview mirror told me everything. He finally realized what he'd lost. But let me start from the beginning. Before we jump in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who would walk away from her marriage with a smile. I always believed in working things out, in compromise, in building something together. That's what marriage is supposed to be, right? But sometimes, life has a way of showing you exactly who people are, and more importantly, who you are. My name is Jessica Mitchell, though everyone calls me Jess. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Seattle, raised by parents who taught me the value of hard work and self-reliance. My father worked in construction, my mother was a nurse, and they scraped together enough to put me through college, the first in my family to get a degree. I started in tech sales right out of college, not glamorous work, but I had a knack for understanding what people needed before they knew they needed it. That skill helped me climb from entry-level sales to strategic accounts, where I began noticing patterns in the industry that others missed. By 27, I had turned my modest savings into smart investments in promising startups. By 30, I had enough success to become an angel investor. That's how I met Ryan. He was pitching his app at an investment meetup. Confident, charming, ambitious, he had the room captivated, including me. We married after 18 months of dating. The wedding was lavish. His mother, Patricia's doing. She made it clear from the start that her son was marrying down, but she was determined to elevate the occasion. I didn't fight her on it. I was in love, and I thought that was all that mattered. What I didn't understand then was that to the Mitchells, appearances were everything. Ryan came from wealth, from privilege, from generations of good breeding, as Patricia would often say. They lived in Bellevue, in a sprawling house with a view of Lake Washington. Their annual Christmas cards always featured perfectly coordinated outfits and professional photography. Ryan's father, Walter, was a retired executive who spent his days golfing. His sister, Vanessa, had married a surgeon and never worked a day in her life. His brother, Kevin, and wife, Allison, were the quieter ones, always orbiting around Patricia's son. In the beginning, Ryan seemed different from them. He laughed about his family's obsession with status. He said he admired my work ethic, my independence. He told me I was a breath of fresh air. But looking back, I should have noticed how he always introduced me as my wife Jessica, rather than letting me speak about my own career. How he'd subtly correct my table manners at family gatherings. How he'd frame my insights as his own when we were with his friends. The Mitchells had a tradition, an annual dinner where family achievements were celebrated and shortcomings were critiqued under the guise of helpful feedback. It was essentially a performance review for family members, with Patricia as the unyielding CEO. I'd survived 3 of these dinners before, keeping my head down, smiling through Patricia's backhanded compliments about how refreshingly unpretentious I was. This year's dinner was at Kiyomi, an exclusive Japanese fusion restaurant downtown. Ryan had been on edge for weeks. His app wasn't performing as well as projected, and he'd been passed over for a promotion he'd told everyone was a sure thing. I tried to be supportive, but he grew increasingly distant, spending late nights at the office, coming home smelling of whiskey and expensive perfume that wasn't mine. I knew about the affair. I'm not stupid. But I was trying to figure out my next move carefully. That night at Kiyomi would end up making the decision for me. I arrived at the restaurant separately from Ryan. He'd claimed a last-minute meeting, but I suspected he was meeting her before joining his family. The maitre d' greeted me with a puzzled look when I gave the name Mitchell. "I'm sorry, madam, but the Mitchell party specifically requested that we not seat anyone arriving alone." You're welcome to wait at the bar until the rest of your party arrives. I frowned, confused. But my husband and his family should already be here. The reservation was for 7 o'clock. The maître d' checked his tablet again and shook his head apologetically. The Mitchell party arrived 20 minutes ago. They're seated in the private dining room. But I was instructed by my mother-in-law, I finished for him. Patricia Mitchell, about my height, perfect blonde bob, looks like she's perpetually smelling something unpleasant. He maintained his professional composure, but his eyes confirmed my guess. I see, I said, reaching for my phone. I texted Ryan, I'm at the restaurant. The maître d' says I can't join you. 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared. Then reappeared. Finally, Mom made the reservation. Talk to her. I took a deep breath. 5 years of marriage, and this was what it had come to. Being barred from a family dinner like an unwelcome stranger. I could have left. Maybe I should. But something in me snapped. Not in anger, but in clarity. I'll wait at the bar, I told the maître d'. The bar at Kiyomi was a vision of understated luxury, backlit jade, hand-blown glass fixtures, and a wall of rare Japanese whiskeys. I ordered a neat Yamazaki 12 and watched the door to the private dining room. Through the frosted glass, I could make out silhouettes, Patricia's perfect posture, Walter's slouched shoulders, Vanessa's animated gestures, Kevin and Allison's. Stillness and Ryan, his head bent towards his mother like a supplicant. I didn't plan what happened next. Or maybe subconsciously I'd been planning it for years. A familiar voice called my name. Jess? Jess Mitchell? I turned to see Marcus Torres, resplendent in a tailored navy suit. Marcus and I had worked together years ago, before he left sales to take over his family's luxury car dealership. Marcus, I smiled, genuinely pleased to see a friendly face. It's been too long. He took the stool next to mine. What brings you here? Business dinner? Family dinner, I said, nodding towards the private room. Or it was supposed to be. Marcus followed my gaze, then looked back at me, his expression shifting to understanding. Ah, you're waiting to join them? I shook my head. Apparently I wasn't on the guest list. Marcus's eyebrows shot up. Their loss, he said smoothly. Join me instead? I'm meeting some clients, but they just texted that they're running late. Before I could answer, the private room door opened, and Patricia Mitchell emerged, perfectly coiffed and wearing an expression of practiced concern. She spotted me immediately. Of course she had known I was there all along. Jessica, darling, she said, her voice carrying just enough to turn heads at nearby tables. What are you doing out here all alone? Didn't Ryan tell you we changed the reservation time? I felt the eyes of the bar patrons on me. This was exactly what Patricia wanted, to make me look lost, confused, out of place. No, he didn't, I said, keeping my voice even. The maître d' said you instructed him not to seat me. Patricia's smile didn't falter, but her eyes hardened. A misunderstanding, I'm sure. Though really, Jessica, we did tell you this was a formal dinner. That outfit is rather casual, isn't it? I glanced down at my black silk jumpsuit and heels, perfectly appropriate for any upscale restaurant in Seattle. Patricia knew it, too. This wasn't about my clothes. This was about putting me in my place. Before I could respond, Marcus stood and extended his hand to Patricia. Mrs. Mitchell? Marcus Torres, owner of Torres Luxury Automobiles. I'm a colleague of Jessica's, from her early career days. Patricia's eyes widened slightly as she took in Marcus's bespoke suit, designer watch, and confident demeanor. This wasn't part of her script. Oh, how lovely to meet you, she said, instantly shifting into her society persona. Any friend of Jessica's is welcome to join us, of course. Marcus smiled. Actually, I was just saying to Jess that she should join me and my clients. We have some business to discuss. Patricia's expression flickered between confusion and annoyance. Business? Jessica doesn't. Jessica is one of our most successful angel investors, Marcus cut in smoothly. Her portfolio performance is legendary in certain circles. I watched as Patricia struggled to process this information. In 5 years of knowing me, she had never once asked about my career beyond vague references to your little job. Ryan had certainly never enlightened her. Well, she finally managed. Family comes first, I always say. Jessica, Ryan is expecting you. She turned to Marcus. Perhaps another time, Mr. Torres. Marcus looked at me, waiting for my decision. And in that moment, I realized I had one. I had a choice. I always had. Actually, Patricia, I said standing, I think I'll take Marcus up on his offer. Please give Ryan my regrets. Patricia's smile froze. Don't be ridiculous. This is our annual family dinner. Everyone is waiting. I wasn't on the guest list, remember? I said quietly. Give Vanessa my seat. She's been eyeing that promotion to favorite daughter-in-law for years. Patricia's mask slipped, just for a second, revealing the coldness beneath. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. If you leave now, Jessica, Ryan will be very disappointed. I'm sure he'll survive, I said. He's had plenty of practice disappointing me. I turned to Marcus. Shall we? As we walked away, I felt Patricia's stare boring into my back. I'd never defied her so openly before. But more importantly, I'd never stood up for myself. Marcus and I settled at a table on the other side of the restaurant, where he immediately confessed there were no clients joining us. I could see what was happening, he said. That woman was trying to humiliate you in public. I smiled ruefully. That's Patricia. She's been doing it for years, just usually with more subtlety. And your husband allows this? Marcus asked, his disgust evident. I considered the question. Ryan. He's complicated. He wants his mother's approval more than anything, more than my happiness, certainly. Marcus shook his head. Then he's a fool. We ordered dinner, and for the first time in years, I enjoyed a meal without calculating every word, without bracing for the next subtle dig or backhanded compliment. Marcus and I caught up on the years since we'd worked together. He told me about taking over his family's dealership and transforming it into the premier luxury car showroom in the Pacific Northwest. I told him about my investments, my successes, and failures, my growing portfolio. You always were the smartest person in the room, Marcus said. I remember how you predicted the mobile payment surge before anyone was talking about it. I laughed. I just pay attention to patterns. Speaking of which, I nodded toward the front of the restaurant, where Ryan was now standing, scanning the dining room with an expression of barely contained fury. His eyes locked on our table, and he strode over, ignoring the host trying to intercept him. Jessica, he hissed, looming over our table. What the hell do you think you're doing? I took a sip of my wine. Having dinner with an old friend. Ryan, this is Marcus Torres. Marcus, my husband, Ryan Mitchell. Ryan barely glanced at Marcus. Mother said you deliberately embarrassed her in front of everyone. That's interesting, I replied. Because from where I'm sitting, she was the one who tried to bar me from a family dinner and then criticized my appearance in front of the entire bar. Ryan's jaw tightened. You're making a scene. Actually, Marcus interjected, the only person making a scene right now is you, Mr. Mitchell. Ryan finally turned to look at Marcus, really look at him, taking in the expensive suit, the confident posture, the protective way he'd shifted toward me. And who exactly are you? Ryan demanded. An old colleague, Marcus replied calmly, and the owner of Torres Luxury Automobiles. Something shifted in Ryan's expression. I knew that look. It was the same calculation he made whenever he met someone who might be useful to him. His anger didn't disappear, but it was suddenly masked behind the smooth, charming facade he wore for networking events. "Torres, I've been meaning to stop by your showroom. I hear you're the only dealer in Seattle with the new Aston Martin Vantage on the floor." And there it was, Ryan's dream car. He'd been talking about the Vantage for years, hanging photos of it in his office, even setting it as his phone background. It represented everything he aspired to: success, exclusivity, arrival. He'd been almost ready to buy one for as long as I'd known him, always just one bonus or promotion away. Marcus nodded. "We have two, actually. One is already sold, but the other, a special edition, just arrived yesterday." Ryan couldn't hide his interest. "Special edition?" "One of 12 worldwide," Marcus confirmed. "British racing green, tan leather interior, custom wheels." I could practically see Ryan salivating. His dream car, in his favorite color combination. Rare enough to make his colleagues envious. The perfect status symbol. "Maybe I'll come by tomorrow," Ryan said, his voice casual, though I knew he was anything but. Then, as if remembering why he'd come over, he turned back to me. "Jessica, Mother expects you to join us for dessert at least." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a request. It was an order, delivered with the absolute certainty that I would obey. "I've made other plans," I said quietly. Ryan stared at me, disbelief giving way to anger. "Other plans? This is our family dinner." "A family dinner I wasn't invited to," I reminded him. "Don't be so sensitive," he snapped. "Mother gets caught up in details sometimes. It wasn't personal." But it was personal. It had always been personal. Every slight, every exclusion, every time Ryan had stood by while his mother chipped away at my dignity. It was all intensely personal. "Ryan," I said, my voice steady, "go back to your family. I'm going to finish my dinner with Marcus, and then I'm going home." Ryan leaned in, lowering his voice to a harsh whisper. "If you don't come with me right now, we're going to have a serious problem, Jessica." I met his gaze. "I think we already do." For a moment, I thought he might make an even bigger scene. Instead, he straightened, adjusting his tie. "We'll discuss this at home," he said, his tone making it clear what kind of discussion it would be. The same one we'd had countless times, where he explained why his mother's behavior was reasonable and my feelings were not. I smiled thinly. "I look forward to it." After Ryan stalked back to the private room, Marcus let out a low whistle. That was intense. "That was Tuesday," I replied, surprising myself with a laugh. We finished our meal, deliberately avoiding further discussion of Ryan or the Mitchells. As Marcus walked me to my car, he handed me his business card. "If you ever want to see that Aston Martin Vantage," he said, "come by the showroom. No strings attached." I tucked the card into my purse. I might just do that. I drove home, slowly, my mind racing faster than my car ever could. By the time I pulled into our Madison Park driveway, I had made my decision. Our house was dark. Ryan was still at dinner, probably sitting through Patricia's annual assessment of everyone's failures and achievements. I wondered what she'd say about me this year. Actually, I didn't wonder at all. I knew. Inside, I went, straight to my home office and powered up my laptop. I checked my investment accounts first, all in my name, all performing well. Then I opened the safe behind the abstract painting Ryan hated and removed the files I kept there. Copies of our prenuptial agreement, insisted upon by Patricia, property deeds, investment records, and most importantly, documentation of the loans I'd made to Ryan over the years. Loans that had funded his app development, loans that had covered the down payment on our house when his savings fell short, loans that had financed the lifestyle that impressed his friends and family, loans that he had never repaid, despite his promises. I spread the documents across my desk and began making notes. By the time headlights swept across the driveway 3 hours later, I had a clear accounting of exactly what Ryan owed me, financially and otherwise. The front door slammed, and heavy footsteps crossed the foyer. I didn't look up when Ryan appeared in my office doorway. "You humiliated me tonight," he said without preamble. I continued reviewing my notes. "That's interesting, because I was thinking the same thing about you. My mother went to a lot of trouble to arrange that dinner. And to ensure I wasn't part of it," I added. Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture I once found endearing. "You're overreacting. Mother made a mistake with the reservation, that's all. A mistake she's been making for 5 years in different ways? That's quite a coincidence." He stepped into the office, his patience visibly thinning. "What are you doing? It's after midnight." I finally looked up at him. "I'm calculating what you owe me." He frowned. "What?" I gestured to the papers spread across my desk. "The startup capital for your app, $150,000. The down payment on this house, $200,000. The temporary covering of our expenses when you were between jobs, $85,000, plus interest, of course." Ryan's face flushed. "Those weren't loans. That was you contributing to our marriage, to our future." "Really?" "Because I distinctly remember you saying, and I quote, 'I'll pay you back every cent once we turn a profit.' You even drafted promissory notes." I held up the papers with his signature. "Which, legally, makes these loans, not gifts." "You're my wife," he said, as if that explained everything. "What's mine is yours. What's yours is mine." I laughed, without humor. "That's funny, because I've never felt like anything in this marriage was truly mine. Not respect, not support, and certainly not loyalty." His expression changed, wariness replacing anger. "What are you talking about?" "I know about her, Ryan. The late nights, the perfume, the mysteriously depleted joint account." He didn't deny it. He didn't even look ashamed. Instead, he looked annoyed, as if I'd brought up a minor household chore he'd forgotten to complete. "It's not what you think," he said dismissively. "It's just a thing that happened. It doesn't mean anything." Like I don't mean anything?" I asked quietly. "Like my feelings don't mean anything? Like the vows you made don't mean anything?" He threw up his hands. "For God's sake, Jessica, you're making this into some dramatic production. So I made a mistake. So my mother sometimes forgets to include you. So what? Look at the life we have. Look at everything I've given you." I stared at him, truly seeing him perhaps for the first time. "Everything you've given me? Ryan, I built this life. I funded your business. I made the down payment on this house. I invested wisely while you blew money on impressing people who don't care about you. You haven't given me anything except disrespect and lies." His face contorted with fury. "You think you're so perfect, don't you? Self-made Jess, the girl from the wrong side of the tracks who made good. Well, let me tell you something. Without me, without my family name and connections, you'd be nothing. You'd be worthless." There it was. The word hung between us like a physical thing. Worthless. In that moment, everything became crystal clear. I closed the folder in front of me and stood up. "I want you to leave," I said calmly. Ryan blinked, caught off guard by my sudden shift. "What?" "I want you to pack a bag and leave. Now," he snorted. "This is my house." "Actually," I said, sliding a document across the desk toward him, "it's mine. The mortgage is in my name. I made the down payment. You've contributed exactly 15% of the monthly payments over 5 years, which I'm happy to refund to you." Ryan stared at the paper, his face paling. "You can't do this." "I already have," I said. "I've also frozen our joint accounts, as I have evidence you've—" been misappropriating funds. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow regarding the dissolution of our marriage and the repayment of your outstanding debts to me." He looked up at me, shock giving way to calculation. Ryan had always been quick to adapt when backed into a corner. "Jess, come on," he said, his voice softening. "We're both tired and saying things we don't mean. Let's sleep on it, talk in the morning." "I've slept on it for 5 years," I replied. "I'm done talking." "You're being ridiculous," he said, anger creeping back into his tone. "Where am I? Supposed to go at this hour?" "I hear your mother keeps your childhood bedroom exactly as you left it," I suggested. "Or perhaps your girlfriend has room." Ryan's face hardened. "You'll regret this. You think you can just walk away? My family has connections you can't imagine. We can make life very difficult for you." I smiled then, a real smile that seemed to unnerve him more than anger would have. "Ryan, your family has been making my life difficult since the day I met them. The difference is now I don't care." I walked past him, headed for our bedroom, my bedroom now. He caught my arm, his fingers digging in painfully. "This isn't over," he hissed. I looked pointedly at his hand until he released me. "Yes, it is. Pack your things and get out, or I'll call the police and have you removed. Your choice." I left him standing there, went to the bedroom, and locked the door behind me. Through the wall, I heard him cursing, heard something shatter, the vase his mother had given us as a wedding present, I guessed from the sound. Then came the stomping of feet, the opening and slamming of drawers, the jingle of keys being snatched from the entry table. Finally, the front door slammed so hard the windows rattled. I sank onto the bed, expecting to feel grief or fear, or at least uncertainty. Instead, I felt lighter than I had in years. I picked up my phone and looked at the business card Marcus had given me. It was after 1 a.m., but I sent a text anyway. "That Aston Martin Vantage you mentioned? I'd like to see it tomorrow. First thing." To my surprise, he replied almost immediately, "Showroom opens at 9. I'll have it waiting." I slept soundly for the first time in months. The next morning I dressed with care, a sleek pantsuit, my best heels, subtle makeup. Professional, confident, ready for a new chapter. I arrived at Torres Luxury Automobiles precisely at 9 a.m., and Marcus was waiting as promised. The car was even more beautiful in person. British racing green with tan leather interior, exactly as described. Exactly as Ryan had always dreamed. "Want to take it for a test drive?" Marcus asked. I ran my hand over the smooth curve of the hood. "Actually, I want to buy it." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "It's not an impulse purchase kind of car, Jess. Maybe take it for a spin first, think it over?" I shook my head. "I don't need to think it over. I've done my research. I know exactly what I'm doing." 2 hours later, I drove the Aston Martin Vantage out of the showroom, the paperwork signed and payment transferred from my personal account. The car handled like a dream, responsive and powerful. I understood now why Ryan had coveted it for so long. It wasn't just a car, it was a statement. My statement. I drove straight to my lawyer's office where I handed over the file I'd prepared the night before. Linda Kim had been my attorney since my first successful investment, and she didn't bat an eye at my request for an immediate divorce filing. "The prenup should make this straightforward," she said, reviewing the documents. "But these loans, he'll fight you on them." "Let him," I replied. "I have the paperwork and his signature on every page." Linda nodded approvingly. "I'll have this filed today. Where can we serve him with the papers?" I smiled. "I have a pretty good idea." After leaving Linda's office, I drove to the Mitchell family home in Bellevue. I knew Ryan would be there. Where else would he go in a crisis but running home? To Mommy? I pulled up to the circular driveway, the Aston Martin's engine purring like a contented cat. Through the large front windows, I could see movement inside. Patricia pacing in her designer loungewear, gesturing emphatically. I didn't need to go in. That wasn't why I'd come. Instead, I simply waited, engine running, until the front door opened and Ryan emerged, likely headed to drown his sorrows at his favorite bar. He froze when he saw the car, his dream car, in his favorite color, parked in his mother's driveway, with his wife behind the wheel. I rolled down the window as he approached, his expression a fascinating mix of confusion, anger, and naked desire. For the car, not for me. "Jessica, what is this?" he demanded, staring at the vehicle like he couldn't believe his eyes. I revved, the engine slightly, enjoying the way the sound made him flinch. "This is me buying myself a divorce present." How did you?" He couldn't even form a complete sentence. "That's my dream car." I laughed. "No, Ryan, it's my car. Just like the house is my house. Just like my money is my money." His face contorted with fury. "You think this is funny? You think you can humiliate me like this?" "Actually," I said, "I think it's poetic justice. You called me worthless. But here I am in a car worth more than you've earned in the past 3 years. Before he could respond, a sleek, black sedan pulled into the driveway behind me. A woman in a tailored suit emerged, carrying a leather portfolio. "Ryan Mitchell?" she called out. Ryan turned, still dazed. "Yes?" "I'm from Kim Legal Services. I'm here to serve you with divorce papers." As the woman approached him with the documents, I put the car in gear. Ryan spun back toward me, his face pale. "Jessica, wait." But I didn't wait. I didn't need to hear whatever he was about to say. The excuses, the promises, the threats. I simply smiled, waved, and drove away, leaving him standing in his mother's driveway with divorce papers in one hand and the shattered remains of his ego at his feet. In my rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of Patricia coming out of the house, no doubt drawn by the commotion. Her face as she took in the scene, her son, the divorce server, and me driving away in an Aston Martin, was worth every penny of the car's price tag. I pressed my foot on the accelerator and felt the power of the engine respond instantly. Ahead of me stretched an open road and a future entirely of my own making. Worthless? No. I was worth everything. And now, finally, I knew it. The Aston Martin handled like a dream as I navigated through the winding roads of Bellevue, putting distance between myself and the life I was leaving behind. Each turn of the wheel felt like turning a page in my story, each mile bringing me closer to the woman I was meant to be all along. I hadn't planned on buying Ryan's dream car when I woke up that morning. It was an impulse decision. But as I felt the leather seat cradle me and heard the engine's perfect purr, I knew it was the right one. This wasn't about revenge, though the look on Ryan's face had certainly been satisfying. This was about reclaiming my power. My phone buzzed incessantly on the passenger seat. Ryan had already called 12 times in the 20 minutes since I'd driven away from his mother's house. I silenced it without looking and focused on the road ahead. The sky was that perfect Seattle blue that only appears on rare days, when the clouds decide to take a break from their usual vigil. It felt like an affirmation. I drove to Capitol Hill, to the high-rise condo building where I'd impulsively purchased a unit 3 months ago. Ryan didn't know about it. I'd bought it as an investment property through one of my LLCs, but somewhere in my subconscious, I think I knew it would become my escape hatch. The doorman recognized me immediately and greeted me with a warm smile. "Good morning, Ms. Mitchell. Beautiful car." "Thank you, James. And it's Ms. Harmon now," I replied, reverting to my maiden name with a lightness that surprised me. "I'll be staying in Unit 1805 for the foreseeable future." If James was surprised, he didn't show it. He simply nodded and held the door open for me. "Welcome home, Ms. Harmon." Home. The word resonated as I rode the elevator to the 18th floor. The condo was sparsely furnished, just the basics I'd arranged when I closed on the property. But it had floor-to-ceiling windows that captured the Seattle skyline in all its glory, hardwood floors that gleamed in the morning light, and most importantly, not a single trace of Ryan or the Mitchells. I set my overnight bag down and walked to the windows, gazing out at Elliott Bay in the distance. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. No calculating my words to avoid Patricia's subtle digs. No pretending not to notice Ryan's late nights. No more shrinking myself to fit into the box they had created for me. My phone rang again, but it wasn't Ryan this time. It was Linda, my lawyer. "He's been served," she said without preamble when I answered. "And he's not taking it well." I laughed softly. "I'm aware. His mother has already called our office 3 times. Apparently she wants to speak to my supervisor about the unprofessional manner in which we served the papers. I told her, I am the supervisor. I'm sure she loved that. About as much as a root canal, Linda confirmed. Listen, Jess, things are going to get ugly. The Mitchells don't strike me as the type to go quietly. I moved away from the window and sat on the single chair in the living room. I'm prepared for that. I have all the documentation for the loans. The prenup is ironclad. Patricia made sure of that herself, though I doubt she expected it to work in my favor. It's not just the legal battle I'm worried about, Linda said. People like the Mitchells. They play dirty. They'll try to ruin your reputation, poison your social connections, maybe even go after your business relationships. I thought about that for a moment. Let them try. Seattle's tech community knows my track record. My investments speak for themselves. Still, be careful. Document everything. If Ryan or any of them contact you, don't respond directly. Forward it all to me. After hanging up with Linda, I made a list of things I needed. Furniture, household essentials, personal items still at the Madison Park house. I'd have to go back eventually to collect my things, but not today. Today was for moving forward. I ordered takeout from my favorite Thai place and spent the rest of the day setting up my new life, changing my mailing address, updating account information, sending key client notices about my change of contact details. By evening, I was exhausted but calm. The kind of exhaustion that comes from purpose, not anxiety. As night fell over Seattle, I made a bed of blankets near the windows and lay there watching the city lights flicker to life. My phone had finally stopped ringing. Ryan had called 27 times before giving up. There were also 6 calls from Patricia, 3 from Vanessa, and surprisingly, 1 from Kevin. I ignored them all. There was nothing left to say. Just as I was drifting off to sleep, a text came through from a number I didn't recognize. I heard what happened. Are you okay? Marcus. I smiled into the darkness. Better than okay. Thank you for the car. The wide pleasure was mine. If you need anything else, I'm here. I set the phone aside, feeling a curious warmth that had nothing to do with the blankets. It wasn't romantic interest. It was too soon for that, and besides, Marcus was just being kind. It was the simple reminder that not everyone in the world was like the Mitchells, that there were people who saw value in me beyond what I could do for them. I fell asleep thinking about value, about worth, about how we so often let others determine what we're worth instead of setting the price ourselves. Morning came with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I showered in my nearly empty bathroom, dressed in one of the few outfits I'd brought with me, and headed out to begin rebuilding my life. First stop, a furniture store to make my new place livable. Second, the bank to complete the separation of my finances. Third, a visit to my most important client, whose investment portfolio I managed. Theodore Baldwin was in his 70s, a tech pioneer who'd made his fortune in the early days of computing and now enjoyed watching his wealth grow through strategic investments. He'd been my client for 3 years, ever since I'd doubled the return on an investment his previous advisor had dismissed as too risky. Theo hadn't cared that I was younger than his grandchildren, or that I didn't come from money. He only cared about results, and I delivered those consistently. His assistant showed me into his home office overlooking Lake Washington. Theo was at his desk, glasses perched on his nose as he read something on his tablet. "Jessica," he greeted me with a warm smile, setting the device aside. "This is an unexpected pleasure. I thought our quarterly review wasn't until next month." I took the seat across from him. "It's not. This is a personal visit, Theo." His bushy eyebrows rose. "Should I be concerned?" "Not about your investments," I assured him. "They're performing exactly as projected. It's my personal situation that's changed. I've left my husband." Theo sat back in his chair, studying me. "I see. And you're telling me this because Ryan and his family have connections in this city, and they're not above using them to make trouble for me. I wanted you to hear directly from me that my professional capabilities remain unchanged. Your portfolio is and will continue to be my top priority." The old man's face broke into a grin. "You think I care about your marital status? Jessica, I hired you because you're brilliant with money. Unless you're planning to become suddenly stupid, I don't see how your divorce affects our working relationship." I laughed, relief washing over me. "Thank you, Theo. Now," he leaned forward, eyes twinkling with interest, "tell me the real reason you're here." I hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I need advice from someone who's navigated Seattle's upper echelons longer than I have. The Mitchells are going to try to discredit me, professionally and personally. I need to be prepared." Theo nodded thoughtfully. "Patricia Mitchell does fancy herself a queen bee. Been that way since she married Walter 30-some years ago. New money trying desperately to seem like old money." This was news to me. New money? Ryan always said his family had been wealthy for generations. Theo snorted. Walter's father had money, sure, but Patricia? Her father owned a construction company. Successful, but hardly the blue blood she pretends to be. She married Walter and reinvented herself. The irony wasn't lost on me. Patricia had spent years making me feel inferior for my modest background, when her own origins weren't so different. "Here's my advice," Theo continued. "First, get ahead of the story. The Mitchells will spin a narrative about you being a gold digger who's abandoning poor Ryan. Beat them to the punch with your own narrative." "I don't want to badmouth them publicly," I said. "That feels undignified." "Who said anything about badmouthing? Simply make your professional achievements more visible. Remind the community who you are beyond being Ryan Mitchell's wife." "And second?" Theo's expression turned serious. "Don't underestimate Patricia. She's built her entire identity around her family's social standing. You're not just leaving her son, you're threatening her carefully constructed world. She'll fight dirty." I thought about the signs I'd missed over the years, the way Patricia controlled the family narrative, the way Ryan deferred to her judgment even when it contradicted his own interests, the way she'd systematically tried to diminish me from the moment I entered their lives. "Thank you, Theo. I appreciate your candor." He waved a dismissive hand. "Just make sure my portfolio keeps performing, and we'll call it even." As I left Theo's lakeside mansion, I felt fortified for what was coming. I wasn't naive enough to think the Mitchells would let me walk away without consequences. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of their retaliation. I was prepared for it. My next stop was my house in Madison Park. Ryan's car wasn't in the driveway, which meant he was either still at his mother's or had gone to stay with his girlfriend. Either way, his absence made this easier. I used my key to enter what had once been our shared home and was immediately struck by how different it felt. In just one day, it had transformed from a sanctuary to a museum of a life I no longer recognized. I moved efficiently through the rooms, gathering only what I truly needed: clothes, personal documents, a few sentimental items that had nothing to do with Ryan or his family. I was in the master bathroom collecting my toiletries when I heard the front door open. "Jessica?" Ryan's voice echoed through the house. Your car's outside. I know you're here." I took a deep breath and continued packing my things. Let him come to me. Footsteps approached the bedroom, and then Ryan was standing in the bathroom doorway, looking like he hadn't slept. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his designer shirt wrinkled. "So it's true," he said, his voice flat. "You're really doing this." I didn't look up from my task. The divorce papers weren't clear enough? "You can't just throw away 5 years of marriage because of one fight," he insisted. Now I did look at him, incredulous. "One fight? Ryan, we've been having the same fight for 5 years. You just weren't listening." He ran a hand through his already messy hair, a gesture that once made my heart soften. Now it just seemed theatrical. "Look, I know I messed up. The thing with Amber—" "This isn't about Amber," I interrupted. "Though your affair certainly didn't help. This is about you allowing your mother to humiliate me, repeatedly, for years. This is about you caring more about appearances than reality. This is about you calling me worthless when everything you have because of me." Ryan flinched at the word worthless, but quickly recovered. "I didn't mean that. I was angry. People say things they don't mean when they're angry." "No, Ryan. People say exactly what they mean when they're angry. They just usually have the sense to lie about it afterward." I zipped up my toiletry bag and tried to move past him. He blocked the doorway. "Move, Ryan." "We need to talk about this," he insisted. "You can't just walk away. What about the house? What about the investments? What about the car?" I suggested, watching his expression darken. "That was a low blow," he said, jaw clenched. "You knew how much I wanted that car. And you knew how much I wanted a husband who would stand up for me. I guess we're both disappointed." Something shifted in his eyes then. The familiar calculation I'd seen countless times when he was trying to figure out the best angle to get what he wanted. "Jess," he said, his voice softening as he took a step toward me. "Baby, I know I've been an idiot. I know I've taken you for granted. But we can fix this." He reached for my hand, and I let him take it, curious where this performance was going. "I love you," he continued. "I've always loved you. Yes, I made mistakes. Yes, I should have stood up to my mother. But I was caught between the two women I love most in the world. Can't you understand how difficult that was for me?" I almost laughed. Even now he was making himself the victim, casting his cowardice as a noble sacrifice. "Let's start over," he urged, squeezing my hand. "We'll see a counselor. I'll tell Mother to back off. I'll end things with Amber. Whatever you want, Jess. Just don't throw away everything we've built together." For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine it, going back, trying again, believing his promises. The familiar comfort of routine, the social status of being Mrs. Ryan Mitchell, the path of least resistance. Then I thought about the night before, lying on blankets in my empty condo, feeling freer than I had in years despite having only the bare essentials. I gently pulled my hand from his. "There is no we anymore, Ryan. You made sure of that." His face hardened, the loving husband act vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. "Is this about money? Because if it is, I'm sure we can come to an arrangement. The loans have terms, clearly outlined in documents you signed." I cut in. "My lawyer will be in touch about a repayment schedule." Ryan's eyes narrowed. "You know Mother will never let this stand. She knows people, Jess, important people." And there it was. The threat, barely veiled. The reminder that in their world, connections mattered more than merit. "I'm counting on it," I replied calmly. "Now please move. I have things to do today." Anger flashed across his face, but something in my expression must have warned him not to push further. He stepped aside, though I could feel his eyes burning into my back as I walked away. In the bedroom, I finished gathering my things, ignoring his hovering presence. As I was about to leave, my eye caught on something, the small jewelry box on my dresser. Inside was a pearl necklace Patricia had given me for our first Christmas as a married couple. "Your fashion sense is so basic, dear," she had said. At the time. "Pearls are classic. They might elevate your look a bit." I had thanked her, worn the necklace dutifully at family gatherings, and hated every moment of it. Now I picked up the box and held it out to Ryan. "Please return this to your mother. I won't be needing it anymore." His expression was unreadable as he took the box. "This isn't over, Jessica." I shouldered my bag and gave him a level look. "Yes, Ryan, it is." As I drove away from the Madison Park house for the last time, I felt no regret, no second-guessing. Only a deep certainty that I was doing exactly what I should have done years ago. Back at my condo, I found a delivery of furniture being unloaded, the pieces I'd ordered the day before. The empty space was quickly transforming into something that felt like mine. Not ours, not a compromise, but a reflection of my tastes alone. I directed the placement of each item, enjoying the simple pleasure of making decisions without considering anyone else's preferences. By late afternoon, my new home was taking shape. The modern sectional in deep blue, the glass dining table, the king-sized bed with the fluffy white duvet I'd always wanted but Ryan had vetoed as too feminine. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was progress. My phone chimed with an email notification from Linda. "Call me ACP." I dialed her number immediately. "The Mitchells have hired Lancaster," she said without greeting. I sank onto my new couch. Lancaster and Associates was one of Seattle's most aggressive divorce firms, known for representing the city's elite in scorched earth proceedings that left the less moneyed spouse with nothing. "I thought they might," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "But the prenup?" "They're challenging it," Linda cut in, "claiming you coerced Ryan into signing unfavorable terms by misrepresenting your financial situation." I laughed at the absurdity. "That's ridiculous. Patricia practically wrote the prenup herself. She was the one insisting on protecting the family assets from me, not the other way around." "I know, and we have documentation to prove it. But that's not all. They're also claiming you committed fraud by using Ryan's name and connections to secure investments for your personal portfolio." My amusement vanished. "That's a serious accusation." "It is, and a baseless one, I'm sure. But we need to be prepared. I need documentation of every investment you've made, every client meeting, every decision. We need to prove your business success is entirely your own." After hanging up, I sat in the growing darkness of my condo, thinking. The Mitchells were moving faster than I'd anticipated, and they were playing dirtier than I'd expected. Accusations. A fraud could damage my professional reputation, regardless of whether they were proven. Clients might get nervous, withdraw their business. Years of careful work could be undone by whispers and innuendo. I needed to get ahead of this, just as Theo had advised. I picked up my phone and called Marcus. "Jess," he answered warmly. "How's the car treating you?" "Like a dream," I said. "Listen, I need a favor." "Name it." "I need to make some connections in Seattle's tech investment community. Not clients, I have those, but allies. People who can vouch for my professional reputation when the Mitchells start spreading rumors." There was a pause. "They're coming after you professionally? That's low." "That's Patricia," I replied. "She knows my career is important to me, so that's where she'll attack." "I can help," Marcus said. "There's a tech mixer at the Fairmont next Thursday. All the major players will be there. I can get you an invitation." "Thank you, Marcus." "Jess," he hesitated, then continued, "be careful. The Mitchells. They're not known for playing fair." After we hung up, I walked to the windows and looked out at the Seattle skyline. the Space Needle illuminated against the night sky. I thought about Patricia, sitting in her Bellevue mansion, plotting my downfall with the same meticulous attention she gave to planning charity galas. I thought about Ryan, probably feeding her information about me, about my clients, about my vulnerabilities. They thought they knew me. They thought I was the same woman who had smiled politely through Patricia's insults, who had accepted Ryan's neglect, who had played by their rules for 5 long years. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The week that followed was a blur of activity. During the day, I met with clients, reassuring them that my personal situation wouldn't affect their investments. I gathered documentation for Linda, building an ironclad case against the Mitchells' accusations. I furnished my condo, creating a space that reflected the woman I was becoming rather than the woman I'd been. At night, I researched. I dove into public records, news archives, and business filings, looking for anything that might give me insight into the Mitchells' vulnerabilities. What I found confirmed what Theo had told me. Patricia's background was far more modest than she pretended. Her father's construction company had been successful in a blue-collar way, nothing like the old money pedigree she claimed. More interestingly, Walter Mitchell's investment firm had weathered some questionable dealings in the early 2000s. Nothing illegal, but certainly ethically dubious. The kind of aggressive tax avoidance and corporate restructuring that might embarrass a family so concerned with appearances. I wasn't planning to use this information. Not yet, anyway. But knowledge was power, and I needed all the power I could get. Thursday evening arrived, and with it, the tech mixer at the Fairmont. I dressed with care, a sleek black dress that managed to be both professional and striking, heels that added 3 inches to my height, subtle jewelry that spoke of confidence rather than flash. The Aston Martin turned heads as I valeted it. At the hotel, exactly as I'd intended. Let them talk. Let them wonder. Marcus met me in the lobby, handsome in a charcoal suit. "You look amazing," he said, offering his arm. "I feel amazing," I replied, and it wasn't a lie. Despite the stress of the week, despite the legal battle looming, I felt more myself than I had in years. The ballroom was crowded with Seattle's tech elite, startup founders, venture capitalists, industry veterans. Many faces I recognized, some I knew personally. Marcus led me through the crowd, making introductions, subtly highlighting my investment. Successes without my having to brag. Jessica advised on the Series B for Meditech, he told a group of VCs. Predicted their market expansion perfectly. "That telehealth platform was your pick?" one of them asked, impressed. "Bold move, paid off beautifully." I smiled, accepting the compliment with grace. I recognized the potential early. Sometimes, the greatest opportunities come from seeing what others miss. As the evening progressed, I found myself in conversation with leaders I'd admired from afar, exchanging ideas, making connections that could strengthen my position in the industry. I was in the middle of a fascinating discussion about blockchain applications when I felt a shift in the room's energy. I turned to see Patricia and Walter Mitchell entering the ballroom, Ryan trailing behind them like an afterthought. Patricia was resplendent in designer evening wear, Walter distinguished in his tuxedo. They moved through the crowd with practiced ease, greeting people by name, accepting deference as their due. Marcus appeared at my side. "I didn't know they'd be here," he murmured. "We can leave if you want." I shook my head. "No, this is exactly where I need to be." Our eyes met, and he nodded, understanding. "I'm right behind you." I watched as Patricia worked the room, her gaze eventually landing on me. The momentary widening of her eyes was the only indication of her surprise at finding me there. She leaned in to whisper something to Walter, who glanced my way with a frown. Ryan, following his parents' gaze, went pale when he spotted me. I excused myself from my conversation group and moved deliberately toward the bar, creating a path that would intersect with the Mitchells. Let them decide whether to acknowledge me or pretend they didn't see me. Either option would be revealing. Patricia, ever the strategist, made her choice quickly. She intercepted me halfway to the bar, her smile as sharp as cut glass. "Jessica," she said, voice pitched to carry just far enough for nearby guests to hear. "What a surprise to see you here." I returned her smile with equal insincerity. "Patricia. Walter." I deliberately excluded Ryan from my greeting. "I didn't realize you followed the tech scene so closely," Walter harumphed. "Been investing in tech since before these startup kids were born." "Of course," I said smoothly. "Though I believe your firm specializes more in established industries, manufacturing, retail." Patricia's smile tightened. She knew I was subtly highlighting the difference between Walter's traditional investments and the cutting-edge tech. Work I did. "We diversify," she said. "A concept I'm sure you're familiar with, given your varied background." The implied insult hung in the air, but I let it pass. Speaking of diversification, I was just discussing blockchain applications in healthcare with the Meditech team. Fascinating potential there. Before Patricia could respond, a woman approached our group, Eliza Chen, founder of a healthcare AI startup I'd invested in early. "Jessica!" Eliza exclaimed. "I've been looking for you. That prediction you made about regulatory changes in the healthcare space? Spot on. Just wanted to thank you for steering us clear of that potential minefield." I introduced Eliza to the Mitchells, enjoying the way Patricia's expression flickered between social politeness and growing annoyance as Eliza enthused about my strategic insights. "Your daughter-in-law has an uncanny ability to see around corners," Eliza told Patricia. "We doubled our valuation after implementing her recommendations." "Ex-daughter-in-law, technically," I corrected gently. "Ryan and I are in the process of divorcing." Eliza's eyes widened slightly, but to her credit, she recovered quickly. "Well, their loss is the tech community's gain. We get more of your brilliant mind now." After Eliza moved on, Patricia fixed me with a cold stare. "Making quite a spectacle of yourself, aren't you? Flaunting your connections." "Not at all," I replied. "Just engaging with my professional community. Something I've been doing for years, though you may not have noticed." Ryan, who had been hovering silently at the edge of our group, finally spoke. "Jess, can we talk? Privately?" I considered him for a moment, noting the anxious glance he cast around the room. He was worried about appearances, as always. Worried what people might think if his estranged wife refused to speak with him. "I don't think we have anything to discuss that our lawyers can't handle," I said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Especially given the fraud accusations. Your family has decided to level against me." A few heads turned at the word fraud. Patricia's face flushed with anger. "This is hardly the place." "I agree," I cut in. "Which is why I'm surprised you chose to bring such serious accusations into a professional setting where my reputation matters. But then, that was the point, wasn't it? To damage my standing in the industry?" Walter stepped forward, placing a restraining hand on Patricia's arm. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion elsewhere," he suggested, ever the pragmatist. I smiled. "There's nothing to discuss. Your law firm has made your position clear. My law firm will respond accordingly." I turned to walk away, but Ryan grabbed my elbow. "Jessica, please." I looked pointedly at his hand until he released me. "Enjoy the rest of your evening," I said, then moved smoothly back into the crowd, leaving them standing there. Marcus found me moments later. "That looked intense," he said, handing me a glass of champagne. I took a sip, letting the bubbles calm my nerves. Patricia Mitchell just discovered I'm not as isolated as she thought. Not as easy to discredit. The look on her face was priceless, Marcus observed, like she'd bitten into something sour. For the rest of the evening, I could feel the Mitchells watching me as I moved through the room, engaging with industry, leaders, laughing at the right moments, projecting confidence and competence. I caught Ryan staring more than once, his expression a mix of confusion and something that might have been regret. By the time I left the Fairmont, I knew two things. With certainty, Patricia's attempt to undermine me professionally had backfired spectacularly, and this was only the beginning of our battle. The morning after the tech mixer, I woke to my phone ringing persistently. Linda's name flashed on the screen. "Turn on Cairo News," she said without preamble when I answered. I grabbed the remote and switched on the TV, catching the tail end of a business segment. A polished anchor was wrapping up an interview with none other than Walter Mitchell. "Concerns about ethical investment practices in Seattle's tech sector," Walter was saying, his expression grave. "When personal relationships influence investment decisions, everyone loses." The anchor nodded sympathetically. "And these concerns stem from your experience with—" "I'd rather not name names," Walter interrupted smoothly. "This isn't about any specific individual. It's about maintaining the integrity of our business community." But the damage was done. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, "Mitchell Investments CEO warns of ethics breaches in tech sector amid family divorce. Scandal." "They're not even trying to be subtle," Linda said in my ear. I muted the TV. "No, they're not." But Walter was careful not to directly accuse me of anything. "Plausible deniability," Linda agreed. "They want to plant seeds of doubt without opening themselves to a defamation suit." I watched Walter shake hands with the anchor as the segment ended. His expression was somber, concerned, the wise elder statesman warning of dangers to the community. It was a masterful performance. "We need to respond," I said. "Carefully," Linda cautioned. "A direct counterattack could make you look defensive." "I'm not talking about a counterattack. I'm talking about a display of strength." After hanging up with Linda, I showered and dressed with particular care, a tailored navy suit, subtle makeup, hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, professional, confident, unruffled. I had 3 client meetings scheduled for the day, and now they carried additional weight. Each was an opportunity to demonstrate that Walter's veiled accusations hadn't affected my business acumen or client relationships. My first meeting was with Eliza Chen, whose AI healthcare startup was preparing for another round of funding. We met at her office in South Lake Union, a sleek space humming with the energy of innovation. "I saw Walter Mitchell on Cairo this morning," Eliza said as soon as we were settled in her glass-walled conference room. Subtle, he was not. I appreciated her directness. "The Mitchells are concerned about appearances." "Their appearances, not yours," she corrected. "I've worked with you for 2 years, Jess. Your investment advice has been consistently sound, based on actual market insight, not personal connections." "Thank you for that," I said, genuinely touched. "But I understand if you'd prefer to work with someone less complicated right now." Eliza laughed. "Are you kidding? I just watched you stand your ground against one of Seattle's old guard families. If anything, I'm more impressed than ever." She leaned forward. "The question is, are you still fully focused on business despite all this personal drama?" I pulled out my tablet and opened the presentation I'd prepared. "Judge for yourself. I've analyzed your competitive landscape for the next funding round. Here's who else is looking for Series C funding in your sector, and here's how we position you to stand out." For the next hour, we dove deep into strategy, market projections, and investor psychology. By the time I left, Eliza had not only confirmed she wanted to continue working with me, but had referred another startup founder my way. 1 down, 2 to go. My second meeting was with a more traditional client, a retired software engineer who had entrusted me with his considerable portfolio. Howard was in his 60s, more cautious by nature, exactly the type who might be swayed by Walter Mitchell's gravitas on morning television. We met at a quiet cafe near his Mercer Island home. Howard was already there when I arrived, newspaper open beside his coffee. The Seattle Times business section featured a small article about Walter's TV appearance. "Jessica," Howard greeted me, folding the paper away. I was beginning to worry. "You might cancel." I slid into the seat across from him. "Why would I do that?" He gestured vaguely toward the folded newspaper. "Given everything that's happening, your divorce, these allegations." "Howard," I said calmly, "has your portfolio underperformed in any way since you became my client?" He blinked. "No, quite the opposite." "And have I ever given you cause to question my ethics or judgment?" "Of course not." "Then why would I cancel a meeting with a valued client? My personal life has no bearing on my professional capabilities." Howard studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Fair point. Though I admit, I was concerned when I saw Walter Mitchell on the news this morning. He's a respected figure." "He's also my soon-to-be ex-father-in-law," I replied. "Which gives him a certain bias, wouldn't you say?" Howard's lips twitched in a reluctant smile. "Also a fair point." He sipped his coffee. "So, shall we discuss my portfolio?" By the time we finished, Howard had not only reaffirmed his confidence in me but had increased his investment allocation. As I was leaving, he called after me. "Jessica? For what it's worth, I've known Walter Mitchell for 20 years. Never particularly cared for him. Too self-important by half." I smiled. "Your secret's safe with me." My final meeting of the day was the most challenging. A potential new client, a tech entrepreneur who had recently sold his company for a substantial sum. Martin Wright had been referred to me weeks ago, before the divorce, before the Mitchells began their campaign. I had no idea if he'd even show up, given the morning's news. I arrived at the upscale restaurant early, secured a quiet table, and waited. 5 minutes past our appointment time, I was beginning to think I'd been stood up when Martin appeared, slightly out of breath. "Sorry I'm late," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Day from hell." "No problem," I assured him. "I appreciate you making the time." Martin ordered a scotch before turning his full attention to me. "So, full disclosure, I Googled you this morning. Found some interesting news articles." I met his gaze steadily. "About my divorce and my former father-in-law's concerns about ethics in the tech investment space." Got it in one. He studied me with open curiosity. "Most people would reschedule a new client meeting after that kind of publicity." "I'm not most people." "Clearly." The waiter arrived with his scotch, and Martin took an appreciative sip. "So, convince me why I should trust you with my money when the Mitchell family seems to think you're the antichrist of ethical investing." I couldn't help but laugh at his bluntness. "The Mitchells think I'm many things, but they've never questioned my financial acumen. As for why you should trust me," I pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "These are the returns I've generated for clients with investment profiles similar to yours over the past 3 years. You'll notice they consistently outperform market averages by significant margins." Martin flipped through the documents, eyebrows rising. "Impressive, but numbers can be manipulated." "They can," I agreed, "which is why I've included contact information for those clients, with their permission. Feel free to call any of them and ask about their experience working with me." Martin closed the folder and sat back, regarding me with new interest. "You know, when my buddy recommended you, he said you were razor sharp. He wasn't exaggerating. I believe in being prepared, especially when entering potentially hostile territory." "Like meeting a new client who's just read questionable things about you in the news?" "Exactly like that." Martin grinned and raised his glass in a small salute. "Well, Ms. Harmon, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Now, let's talk about what to do with my suddenly very large bank account." By the time I left the restaurant, the sun was setting over Elliott Bay, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. I had successfully preserved 2 client relationships and secured a new one, all while the Mitchells' whisper campaign was at its height. It felt like a victory, small but significant. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Dinner tonight? I want to hear how your day went." I hesitated, then typed back, "Rain check? It's been a long day." His response came immediately. "Of course, just wanted to check in. Call if you need anything." I smiled at his understanding. Marcus had been a steadfast ally since that night at Kiyomi, but I needed time alone to process everything that was happening. The Aston Martin purred to life as I headed back to my condo, the familiar sense of power and control washing over me as I navigated through evening traffic. At home, I kicked off my heels and poured a glass of wine, carrying it to the windows that framed the city skyline. Seattle glittered below me, lights winking on as darkness fell. Somewhere out there, the Mitchells were plotting their next move. Somewhere, Ryan was perhaps regretting the choices that had led us here. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Unknown number. "Hello? Is this Jessica Mitchell?" A woman's voice, unfamiliar. "This is Jessica Harmon," I corrected. "Who's calling?" "My name is Diane Lewis from the Seattle Business Journal. I'm working on a story about ethics in tech investment, following Walter Mitchell's statements this morning. I was hoping to get your response." The Mitchells were escalating. Moving from implied accusations to media coverage, I took a sip of wine, considering my options. "Ms. Lewis, I'd be happy to give you a statement. But first, I'd like to know more about the focus of your article." "Of course," Diane replied. "We're examining the intersection of personal relationships and professional decisions in Seattle's tech investment community." Mr. Mitchell raised some concerns about ethical boundaries being crossed. "Since you were previously married to his son and are an active tech investor, we felt your perspective would be valuable." "I see. And have you spoken directly with Walter Mitchell for this piece?" "Yes, I interviewed him this afternoon." "And did he mention me by name in that interview?" A slight pause. "Not explicitly, no. But the context was clear." "Interesting," I murmured. "Well, Ms. Lewis, here's my statement. I have built my investment career on detailed market analysis, industry expertise, and a track record of identifying promising opportunities before they become obvious to the broader market. My personal connections have never influenced my professional judgments. I welcome scrutiny of my investment decisions as they speak for themselves." "That's very clear," Diane said. "But would you care to address the allegations of conflict of interest more directly?" "What specific allegations would those be?" I asked innocently. "As you just said, Walter Mitchell didn't name me in his interview with you." Another pause. "The implication was—" "Ms. Lewis," I interrupted gently. "I'm sure you understand the difference between implications and allegations. One can be printed in a reputable business journal, the other might be considered defamatory. I'm happy to discuss my investment philosophy and track record in detail if you'd like. But I won't respond to vague implications from a family that clearly has a personal axe to grind." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. "I understand your position," Diane finally said. "Would you be willing to provide documentation of your investment track record for the article? Something that demonstrates your success is based on market insight rather than connections." "I would. I'll have my assistant send over verified performance metrics for my key investments over the past 5 years, appropriately anonymized to protect client confidentiality." After hanging up, I immediately called Linda to brief her on the conversation. "Good instincts," she approved. "You defended your reputation without attacking the Mitchells directly. The Business Journal will have to tread carefully now if they don't want to appear biased." "Do you think it will be enough?" I asked. Linda sighed. "Honestly, the Mitchells are just getting started. This media campaign is likely a smokescreen for something else." "Like what?" "If I had to guess, They're trying to damage your professional reputation while building a case against you in the divorce proceedings. The fraud allegations they've made, they're not just trying to scare your clients away. They're trying to establish a pattern they can present in court. I took a deep breath. So what's our next move? We go on offense, Linda said firmly. I've been digging into the Mitchell family finances, and there are some inconsistencies. Nothing illegal, but definitely embarrassing if it came to light. We don't have to use this information, but having it gives us leverage. After ending the call, I returned to the window thinking. The Mitchells had wealth, connections, and social standing. They were used to getting their way, to controlling the narrative. But they had miscalculated in one crucial aspect. They thought I would play by their rules. They were about to learn otherwise. The next morning, a courier delivered a thick envelope from Linda's office. Inside was the dirt she'd dug up on the Mitchell family finances, a labyrinth of shell companies, aggressive tax avoidance strategies, and questionable business partnerships that wouldn't stand up well to public scrutiny. Nothing illegal, as she'd said, but certainly not the squeaky clean image Patricia worked so hard to maintain. I studied the documents over coffee, understanding now why Linda had been so confident. This was powerful ammunition, the kind that could devastate the Mitchells' social standing if deployed strategically. But it wasn't yet time to use it. For now, it was enough to know I had options. My phone chimed with a text from my assistant. Seattle Business Journal just posted their article online. Link sent to your email. I opened the email with some trepidation, scanning for my name in the lengthy piece about investment ethics in the tech sector. I found it halfway through. When asked about potential conflicts of interest, respected investor Jessica Harmon, formerly Mitchell, vigorously defended her professional record, stating her investment decisions have always been based on market analysis rather than personal connections. Documentation provided to the journal confirms Harmon's portfolio has consistently outperformed market benchmarks, lending credence to her assertion that her success stems from expertise rather than privileged relationships. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The article quoted Walter Mitchell's concerns about ethics, but was careful to frame them as general observations rather than specific accusations. Most importantly, it presented my perspective as equally valid, backed by concrete performance data. Not a win, exactly, but not the hit piece the Mitchells had likely hoped for. My phone rang again. Theodore Baldwin, my oldest and most valuable client. Jessica, he greeted me. I see the Business Journal had the good sense to include your perspective in their article. You read it already? I make it a point to stay informed about my investment team, he replied, particularly when they're being targeted by jealous competitors. I smiled at his characterization. Is that how you see the Mitchells? As competitors? Walter Mitchell has been trying to get a piece of my portfolio for 15 years, Theo snorted. Always with the same pitch about tradition and stability and the wisdom of conservative investments. Meanwhile, you've doubled my returns in 3 years with smart, calculated risks. So yes, competitors, and not particularly gracious ones. I appreciate your support, Theo. It's not support, it's self-interest, he corrected, though I could hear the warmth in his voice. Now, the reason I called, I'm hosting a charity gala for the Children's Hospital next weekend. I'd like you to attend as my guest. I hesitated. That's very kind, but the Mitchells will be there, Theo continued as if I hadn't spoken. Patricia is on the hospital board. It would make a statement if you attended, head held high, mingling with the very people they're trying to turn against you. That's precisely why I'm hesitating, I admitted. I'm not sure I'm ready for another confrontation so soon. It won't be a confrontation, Theo assured me. It will be a room full of Seattle's wealthiest and most influential citizens, many of whom are wondering whether to believe Walter's insinuations. Your presence alone would undermine their whisper campaign. He had a point. Hiding away would only feed the narrative that I had something to be ashamed of. Appearing confidently in the Mitchells' social circle would send the opposite message. I'll be there, I decided. What's the dress code? Black tie, Theo replied, sounding pleased. And Jessica? Wear something unforgettable. The week leading up to the gala passed in a blur of meetings, legal consultations, and preparations. The Mitchells had gone eerily quiet after the business journal article, no more TV appearances, no further press statements. Linda assured me this didn't mean they had given up. They were simply regrouping, planning their next attack. I used the respite to solidify my professional relationships and strengthen my legal position. I met with each of my major clients, providing detailed investment updates and subtly reminding them of my track record. I compiled additional documentation for Linda, building our case against the fraud allegations. And in my rare free moments, I continued settling into my new life in the Capitol Hill condo, gradually making it feel like home. The night of the gala arrived with a sense of anticipation. I had taken Theo's advice to heart, selecting a gown that would make a statement, a deep emerald silk that flowed like water, with a daring cut that was sophisticated rather than revealing. I paired it with the diamond earrings I'd bought myself. After my first major investment success, a reminder of what I had built on my own. Marcus had offered to accompany me, but I'd declined. This was a battle I needed to fight alone. The Aston Martin turned heads as I pulled up to the Four Seasons, where the gala was being held. I handed the keys to the valet and took a moment to center myself before walking into the lion's den. The ballroom was transformed into an elegant wonderland, with crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over the wealth and power of Seattle's elite. A string quartet played softly in one corner, while uniformed staff circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I spotted Theo immediately, holding court near the bar, and made my way toward him. Jessica, he greeted me with genuine warmth. You look magnificent. Thank you for inviting me, I replied, accepting the glass of champagne he offered. It's quite the gathering. Indeed. Half the room is talking about the hospital's new pediatric wing, and the other half is talking, about you. I raised an eyebrow. Should I be flattered or concerned? Flattered, definitely. You're the most interesting thing to happen to this stuffy crowd in years. He gestured subtly toward a cluster of people across the room. The Mitchells arrived, about 20 minutes ago. Patricia nearly swallowed her tongue when she saw your name on the guest list. I followed his gaze to where Patricia stood, resplendent in a designer gown that probably cost more than a year's rent. Walter at her side. Ryan hovering nearby with a young woman I assumed was Amber, the girlfriend he'd been seeing behind my back. They were engaged in conversation with the hospital's chief of surgery, though Patricia's eyes kept darting around the room, looking for me, no doubt. I should circulate, I said to Theo. Make the most of this opportunity. That's my girl. I'll be here if you need reinforcements. I moved through the crowd with deliberate confidence, stopping to chat with faces I recognized from the tech mixer, accepting introductions to people I didn't know. Each conversation was an opportunity to present myself as the successful, composed professional I was, rather than the scorned, unstable woman the Mitchells wanted to portray. I was deep in conversation with the CEO of a biotech firm when I felt it, that prickling sensation of being watched intently. I turned slightly to find Ryan staring at me from across the room, his expression unreadable. Our eyes met for a brief moment before he looked away, bending to whisper something to Amber. Excuse me, I said to the CEO. I just spotted someone I need to speak with. It was lovely meeting you. I made my way to the bar, needing a moment to collect myself. The brief eye contact with Ryan had affected me more than I wanted to admit. Not because I missed him or wanted him back, but because of the complexity of emotions it had stirred. Anger, disappointment, and beneath it all, a lingering sadness for what might have been if he had been the man I thought I married. Jessica. Harmon, a smooth voice said beside me. What an unexpected pleasure. I turned to find Walter Mitchell standing there, a tumbler of scotch in his hand, his expression carefully neutral. Walter, I acknowledged, though I'm not sure why it's unexpected. Theo Baldwin is a valued client of mine. And a man who enjoys stirring the pot, Walter replied dryly. I assume he specifically invited you knowing Patricia is on the hospital. Bored. I smiled. Theo has always appreciated a certain dramatic flair. How are you, Walter? I saw your segment on Kiro last week. Very passionate about ethics in the investment community. A flicker of something, wariness perhaps, crossed his face. Simply expressing concerns that many share. Many? Or just you and Patricia? Walter sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 60-plus years. This situation has become unnecessarily adversarial, Jessica. No one benefits from a protracted legal battle, least of all Ryan. I agree completely, I said, keeping my voice level. Which is why I'm puzzled by your family's decision to accuse me of fraud, an attempt to damage my professional reputation. Business and personal matters should remain separate, he said, avoiding the direct accusation. We merely want to ensure that all parties are treated fairly in the divorce proceedings. Fairness, I repeated. Is it fair to claim I coerced Ryan into signing a prenup that Patricia practically dictated? Is it fair to imply I used family connections to build my investment portfolio when my success long predated my relationship with your son? Walter took a sip of his scotch, buying time. Perspectives differ on these matters. Indeed they do. Just as perspectives might differ on certain tax avoidance strategies employed by Mitchell Investments over the years, particularly those involving offshore entities in the Cayman Islands. Walter's glass paused halfway to his lips. I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything, Walter. That would be unethical. I smiled sweetly. I'm simply observing that glass houses and stones rarely mix well. Before he could respond, Patricia materialized at his side, her social smile firmly in place, though her eyes were cold as she took me in. Jessica, she said, voice dripping with false warmth, how brave of you to show your face here. Patricia, I replied calmly, I was just telling Walter how much I appreciate his concern for ethics in business. You must be very proud of his principled stand. Patricia's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Walter has always been a man of integrity, something you might learn from. Oh, I've learned a great deal from both of you over the years, I assured her. Lessons I'll never forget. Something in my tone must have warned her, because her expression shifted from condescension to wariness. What exactly does that mean? I took a sip of my champagne. It means I've been paying attention to everything. Walter placed a restraining hand on Patricia's arm. This isn't the place for this discussion. I couldn't agree more, I said. This is a charity event for sick children. We should all focus on what matters. I raised my glass slightly. Enjoy your evening. As I turned to leave, Patricia couldn't resist one parting shot. Running away, Jessica? You always did know when you were outmatched. I paused, then turned back to face her. Actually, Patricia, I've simply learned to choose my battles wisely. And right now, my priority is building my future, not fighting. Over a past that wasn't what I thought it was. I walked away before she could respond, heart pounding but steps steady. Confronting the Mitchells directly had been a calculated risk, but the flash of uncertainty in Walter's eyes told me it had paid off. They now knew I was not without resources of my own, not without leverage. The rest of the evening passed in, a blur of introductions and conversations. I didn't speak to Ryan, though I caught him watching me several times. Once, I saw him arguing quietly with Patricia, his gestures agitated. her expression stern. I wondered what that was about, but didn't dwell on it. The Ryan Mitchell chapter of my life was closing, one page at a time. As the gala wound down, Theo found me near the dessert table, a satisfied glint in his eye. "I saw you speaking with the elder Mitchells earlier," he said. Judging by Patricia's expression afterward, it was a productive exchange. I smiled. "Let's just say I made my position clear. Good for you. And I've been singing your praises to anyone who would listen all evening, reminding people of your investment track record, your professional acumen, doing my part to counteract whatever rumors the Mitchells have been spreading. Thank you, Theo. I appreciate the support more than I can say." He waved away my gratitude. "Self-interest, remember? I want to make sure my favorite investment advisor isn't distracted by frivolous attacks on her reputation." He patted my arm affectionately. "Now, I believe I saw Ryan heading toward the terrace a moment ago. He looked like a man with something on his mind." I glanced toward the glass doors leading to the outdoor terrace. "I have nothing to say to Ryan." "Perhaps not," Theo agreed. "But he might have something to say to you. Something worth hearing." I hesitated, torn between curiosity and self-preservation. "What makes you think that?" Theo's eyes twinkled. "Call it an old man's intuition. Besides, you've faced down Patricia and Walter tonight. Ryan should be easy by comparison." Against my better judgment, I found myself moving toward the terrace. Doors. The night air was cool and crisp, a welcome respite from the warmth of the ballroom. Ryan stood alone at the railing, staring out at the Seattle skyline, a glass of something amber in his hand. "Ryan," I said softly, announcing my presence. He turned, surprise flickering across his face before he schooled his expression into something more neutral. "Jessica, I wasn't sure you'd speak to me tonight." "I wasn't sure either," I admitted, moving to stand beside him at the railing, careful to maintain distance between us. "Theo seemed to think you might have something to say." Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture that had once made my heart flutter. Now it just reminded me of his agitation whenever he was cornered. "I wanted to apologize," he said finally, "for calling you worthless. It was cruel and untrue, and I've regretted it every day since." The apology was unexpected, and I took a moment to examine my feelings about it. There was a time when those words would have meant everything to me. Now they felt like too little. Too late. "Thank you for saying that," I replied evenly. "But it doesn't change anything." Ryan nodded, looking down at his drink. "I know, I just needed you to hear it." He hesitated, then added, "I saw you talking to my parents earlier. They seemed rattled afterward." I allowed myself a small smile. "Let's just say I made it clear I'm not as defenseless as they might have thought. Mother wanted to leave immediately after your conversation. Dad talked her out of it, said it would create too much gossip." He glanced at me curiously. "What exactly did you say to them?" "That's between me and your parents," I replied. "But I suspect they'll be reconsidering their legal strategy." Ryan studied me for a long moment. "You've changed." "No," I corrected him. "I've always been this person. You just never bothered to see it." He flinched slightly at that. "That's not fair, Jess. I saw you. I loved you." "You loved the idea of me," I said quietly. "The supportive wife who funded your dreams and never challenged your family's treatment of her. The woman who made you feel good about yourself without demanding equal respect in return." Ryan opened his mouth as if to argue, then closed it again, unable to refute the truth of my words. "I did love you," he said eventually. "In my way." "Your way wasn't enough," I replied, not unkindly. "And it wasn't love, Ryan. It was convenience." We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of 5 years and countless missed opportunities hanging between us. "Is she worth it?" I asked finally. "Amber, is she worth everything you're losing?" Ryan's expression clouded. "Amber and I, it's complicated." I laughed softly. "It always is, isn't it? But let me guess. She's younger, she admires you unconditionally, she makes you feel important. Until the day comes when she expects more, when she starts to see the real you. Then what?" He stared at me, a flicker of realization in his eyes. "You really have changed. The Jessica I knew would never be this. Brutal. The Jessica you knew was trying desperately to make a marriage work with a man who couldn't even stand up to his mother for her," I said. "She's gone, Ryan, and she's not coming back." I turned to leave, feeling strangely light, as if a weight had been lifted. Ryan's voice stopped me. "What about the car?" he asked, an edge of bitterness creeping into his tone. Was that just to hurt me? I looked back at him, remembering the expression on his face when he saw me driving away in his dream car. "No, Ryan. It wasn't about hurting you. It was about reminding myself what I'm worth." With that, I walked back into the ballroom, leaving Ryan alone on the terrace with his drink and his regrets. It felt like closure, in a way our legal proceedings never could. An ending written on my terms, not his or his family's. Theo was waiting near the exit, coat already in hand. "Ready to leave?" he asked, observing my expression. "You look like a woman who's said what needed saying." "I am, and I have," I confirmed. "Thank you for pushing me to come tonight." As we walked out together, I saw Patricia watching from across the room, her eyes following me with a mixture of anger and something that might have been grudging respect. I nodded slightly in her direction, a gesture that acknowledged our battle, without conceding defeat. Outside, the valet brought around my Aston Martin, its sleek lines gleaming under the hotel's lights. Theo whistled appreciatively. "Now that," he said, "is what I call a statement piece." I smiled as I slid behind the wheel. "It certainly is. Good night, Theo." As I drove away from the Four Seasons, the city lights blurring around me, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time: peace. The Mitchells weren't defeated, not yet. The divorce proceedings were still ahead. The legal battles would continue. But tonight, I had stood my ground. I had faced them on their own turf and walked away stronger. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, I was excited to see where it might lead. 2 days after the charity gala, Linda called, with news. "The Mitchells want to meet," she said, her voice cautious but optimistic. "Their lawyers reached out this morning requesting a settlement conference." I set down my coffee mug, surprised. "That's unexpected. What changed?" "Something must have happened at that gala," Linda replied. "Whatever you said to Walter Mitchell seems to have made an impression." I smiled, remembering the flash of concern in Walter's eyes when I'd mentioned the Cayman Islands. "Let's just say I gave him a gentle reminder that public scrutiny cuts both ways." "Well, it worked. They're suggesting next Tuesday at our offices. And Jessica?" Their tone was markedly different, less combative, more conciliatory. "What are they offering?" "They didn't specify terms yet, but the fact that they're coming to us rather than demanding we come to them speaks volumes. This is a shift in strategy." After hanging up, I moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows of my condo, gazing out at the Seattle skyline as I considered this development. The Mitchells were retreating, regrouping. That didn't mean victory, not yet, but it was a sign that my stance at the gala had altered the dynamics of our conflict. My phone chimed with a text from Marcus. "Coffee today? I want to hear about the gala." I hesitated, then replied, "How about lunch instead? I have news to share." His response was immediate. Name the place and time. We met at a small bistro in Capitol Hill, away from the downtown spots where we might encounter business associates or, worse, the Mitchells. Marcus was already seated when I arrived, his face lighting up when he saw me. "You look different," he said as I slid into the chair across from him. "More. I don't know. Settled? Do I?" I smiled, accepting the menu the server handed. Me. "Maybe I am. The Mitchells have requested a settlement conference." Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "That's a change of tune. Last I heard, they were all but accusing you of financial crimes on local TV." Things shifted after the gala. I had some interesting conversations with Walter and Patricia, and with Ryan. "Ah," Marcus nodded knowingly. "You found leverage." I studied him over my menu. "What makes you say that?" "Because I know you, Jessica Harmon. You're not just smart, you're strategic. And the Mitchells wouldn't back down unless you gave them a compelling reason to." I laughed softly. "Your faith in me is flattering." "Not faith," he corrected. "Observation. So what's your plan for this settlement conference?" We ordered lunch before I answered, waiting until the server was out of earshot. "To get what I'm owed. Nothing more, nothing less. The loans I made to Ryan, documented with interest. A clean break with no lingering financial entanglements. And the house. In Madison Park? It's mine legally, my down payment, my name on the mortgage. But I'm willing to sell it and split any profits above what I've invested. I don't want to live there anymore, and fighting over it would just prolong this whole process." Marcus nodded approvingly. "Reasonable but firm. The Mitchells won't know what hit them." "They're not used to dealing with women who stand their ground," I agreed. "Patricia runs that family with an iron fist, but outside their circle, she expects women to defer to wealth and social standing." "Speaking of Patricia," Marcus said, leaning forward, "I heard through the grapevine that she's been unusually quiet at her usual social functions this week. No subtle digs at you, no veiled references to the divorce. Complete radio silence." I raised an eyebrow. "Your grapevine reaches into Patricia Mitchell's social circle?" He grinned. "My mother serves on 3 of the same charity boards. She's been keeping an ear out for me, or for you, more accurately." "Your mother's spying on Patricia Mitchell for me?" Now I'm truly flattered. "Don't be. Mom never liked the Mitchells. Too pretentious, she always said. She's enjoying this more." "Then she probably should." Our food arrived, and for a while, we ate in comfortable silence. Marcus was easy to be with. No constant calculation of what to say, no fear of inadvertently triggering criticism. Just conversation that flowed naturally, punctuated by genuine laughter and moments of thoughtful quiet. "Can I ask you something personal?" Marcus said as we were finishing our meals. I tensed slightly but nodded. "You can ask." I might not answer. "Fair enough." He set down his fork. "After everything that's happened, after how they've treated you, do you miss any of it? The marriage, the family connections, the social circle?" The question caught me off guard, not because it was intrusive, but because I hadn't really examined my feelings about what I'd lost, only what I'd gained in walking away. "I miss the idea of it," I said slowly. "The partnership I thought I had with Ryan, the family I hoped we might become. But the reality—" I shook my head. "No, I don't miss being constantly judged and found wanting. I don't miss watching Ryan choose his mother's approval over my dignity, time and again. And I certainly don't miss pretending that wealth and social status are adequate substitutes for genuine connection." Marcus's eyes held mine, his expression thoughtful. "For what it's worth, I think you've gained far more than you've lost." "So do I agreed softly. "Though there are moments when I wonder what might have been if Ryan had been the man I thought he was when we married." "He didn't deserve you," Marcus said, with such quiet certainty that I felt a flush of warmth spread through me. "Thank you for saying that. It's not flattery, Jess. It's just the truth. After lunch, Marcus walked me to my car, his hand resting lightly at the small of my back. It was a gentlemanly gesture, nothing more, but the brief contact sent a spark of awareness through me that I hadn't felt in a long time. "Thanks for lunch," I said, fishing my keys from my purse. "And for listening." "Anytime," he replied. "I mean that. Day or night, whatever you need." He hesitated, then added, "Not just during the divorce. After, too, if you want." I looked up at him, recognizing the careful invitation in his words. "Marcus." "No pressure," he said quickly. "I know your life is complicated right now. I just wanted you to know that when things settle down, when you're ready, I'd like to take you to dinner. A real dinner, not as friends." I felt a flutter of something. Anticipation, possibility, hope. "I'd like that," I admitted. "But you're right. Not yet. I need to finish this chapter before I can start a new one." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I'm a patient man, Jess. I'll be here when you're ready." As I drove away, I found myself smiling. Not because of Marcus's interest, flattering though it was, but because for the first time in years, I was making decisions based solely on what I wanted, what I needed. Not what would please Ryan or appease Patricia or maintain social appearances. Just what was right for me. It was a heady feeling, this freedom, one I intended to protect at all costs. The day of the settlement conference arrived with a sense of anticipation. I dressed carefully, a tailored charcoal suit that was professional, without being flashy, subtle makeup, hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. The impression I wanted to convey was calm competence, not combative aggression. Linda met me in the lobby of her law firm's gleaming downtown offices. "Ready for this?" she asked, leading me toward the conference room. "More than ready," I assured her. "Let's see what they're offering." The Mitchell contingent was already seated when we entered, Walter and Ryan on one side of the long table, their attorney, James Blackwell of Lancaster and Associates, on the other. Patricia was notably absent, a fact that raised my eyebrows. She never missed an opportunity to control a situation. "Good morning," Linda said briskly as we took our seats. "Thank you for suggesting this meeting. I understand you have a settlement proposal to discuss?" Blackwell, a silver-haired man with a reputation for ruthless efficiency, nodded. "We do. But first, Mr. Mitchell Sr. has something he'd like to say." Walter cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "Jessica, I want to apologize for the way this situation has escalated. It was never our intention to damage your professional reputation or cause you personal distress." I kept my expression neutral, though inside I was shocked. Walter Mitchell didn't apologize to anyone, ever. "I appreciate that, Walter, though I must say your television appearance suggested otherwise." He had the grace to look embarrassed. "A regrettable miscalculation. I should have considered the broader implications more carefully." Translation: he hadn't expected me to have dirt on his business dealings that could embarrass him equally, or more. "Water under the bridge," I said magnanimously. "I'm here to move forward, not dwell on past grievances." Linda opened her portfolio. "So, the settlement terms?" Blackwell slid a document across the table. "We're prepared to acknowledge the loans made to Mr. Ryan Mitchell during the marriage, with interest calculated at the prime rate. The total comes to approximately $485,000. Linda and I exchanged a glance. The amount was accurate. They weren't trying to lowball us there. "Additionally," Blackwell continued, "we propose that the Madison Park house be sold, with proceeds divided proportionally according to investment. Given Ms. Harmon's significant contribution to the down payment and mortgage, this would entitle her to approximately 70% of any profits after the sale." Again, a fair proposal. I remained silent, waiting for the catch. "In exchange," Blackwell said, his tone shifting slightly. We ask for 2 considerations. First, that all parties sign a mutual non-disparagement agreement covering both personal and professional matters. Second, that Ms. Harmon return the Aston Martin Vantage to Mr. Mitchell. And there it was. The car, of course. I turned to Ryan, who had been silent thus far. The car is that important to you? He met my gaze for the first time since I'd entered the room. It's not about the car, Jess. It's about what it represents. And what's that? You know what it is, he said quietly. It's the ultimate power move. You took the one thing I've wanted for years, not because you wanted it for yourself, but to prove a point. I considered his words, surprised by his insight. You're not entirely wrong, I admitted. But you're not entirely right either. I didn't buy the car to hurt you, Ryan. I bought it to remind myself that I could. That I had the means and the right to choose what I wanted without considering your feelings first. After years of putting your wants ahead of mine, it was liberating. Walter shifted uncomfortably in his seat. This candid exchange clearly wasn't part of their planned strategy. Be that as it may, Blackwell interjected smoothly. The vehicle is a significant asset, and Mr. Mitchell is willing to pay market value for it as part of the settlement. I looked at Linda, who gave a small nod. This was a negotiation tactic. We'd anticipated. The car was legally mine, purchased with my money, registered in my name. They had no claim to it. But it was also a bargaining chip I could use to secure other concessions. I'm willing to consider it, I said carefully. But I'd need something in return beyond what's already on the table. Blackwell's eyebrows rose. Such as? The fraud allegations, I said, my voice hardening slightly. They need to be formally withdrawn, with a written statement acknowledging they were made without basis. Not just dropped, retracted. Walter and Ryan exchanged glances. That's a significant ask, Blackwell hedged. From a legal perspective. It's the minimum I should expect after your clients attempted to destroy my professional reputation. I cut in. The loans in the house are just math. My career is my future. Linda backed me up seamlessly. We have documented evidence that these allegations were made in bad faith. We're prepared to vigorously contest them in court if necessary, with all the public scrutiny that would entail. The implied threat wasn't subtle. A court battle would mean exposing the Mitchell family finances to examination, something Walter clearly wanted to avoid. Walter leaned over to whisper something to Blackwell, who frowned but nodded. We can agree to formally withdraw the allegations, Blackwell said finally, with the understanding that the retraction will be mutually drafted to minimize any embarrassment to either party. Agreed, Linda said before I could respond. Now, about the timing of these transactions, the loan repayment. One more thing, I interrupted. Where's Patricia? Ryan stiffened. Walter's expression remained carefully neutral. My wife had a prior engagement, he said smoothly. A prior engagement more important than her son's divorce settlement? I pressed. That doesn't sound like Patricia. My mother's schedule is not relevant to these proceedings, Ryan said, an edge of annoyance in his voice. I studied them, both, noting the tension in their postures, the careful way they avoided elaborating. She doesn't know about this meeting, does she? I guessed. You're negotiating behind her back. Walter's jaw tightened, confirming my suspicion. Patricia has strong feelings about this situation. We felt it would be more productive to reach an initial agreement without additional input. I almost laughed at the diplomatic phrasing. Patricia would be furious if she knew they were here, offering concessions, apologizing. It explained the reasonable terms, the absence of the scorched earth tactics Lancaster and Associates was known for. I see, I said, deciding not to push further. Let them handle Patricia. That wasn't my problem anymore. Let's continue then. The rest of the meeting proceeded with surprising efficiency. We hammered out a timeline for the loan repayment, agreed on the process for selling the Madison Park house, and drafted language for the fraud allegation retraction. The car would be returned to Ryan upon completion of all other settlement terms, ensuring the Mitchells fulfilled their obligations. First, 2 hours later, we had a preliminary agreement that met all my key requirements. Not a complete victory, perhaps, but a resolution that would let me move forward without the cloud of a protracted legal battle. As we prepared to leave, Ryan asked, "For a moment alone with me." Linda gave me a questioning look, but I nodded my assent. She and the others filed out, leaving Ryan and me facing each other across the conference table. "Thank you," he said after a moment of awkward silence, "for being reasonable today, for not dragging this out just to punish me. Contrary to what your mother might think, I never wanted to destroy you, Ryan. I just wanted what was rightfully mine." He nodded, looking down at his hands. "I know. I also know I don't deserve your consideration, not after everything." I studied him, noting the tension in his shoulders, the shadows under his eyes. The perfect, polished Ryan Mitchell was showing cracks. "Is Amber still in the picture?" I asked, curiosity getting the better of me. He laughed humorlessly. "No. She left the morning after the gala. Said she hadn't signed up for this level of family drama." "I'm sorry," I said, surprised to find I meant it. Not because I wanted him back, but because I knew what it felt like to be abandoned when things got difficult. "Don't be. You were right about her. About a lot of things." He hesitated, then added, "Mother doesn't know about the settlement terms. Yet. She's going to be difficult when she finds out." "That's not my concern anymore," I reminded him gently. "I know, He ran a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture that now seemed more nervous tic than charming habit. "I'm trying to stand on my own 2 feet for once. Make decisions without her influence. It's harder than I expected." The admission surprised me. Ryan had always insisted he wasn't under Patricia's thumb, even when the evidence suggested otherwise. This self-awareness was new. "It gets easier," I assured him. "The more you do it, the more natural it feels." He looked at me then, really looked at me, as if seeing me clearly for the first time in years. "You're different now. Stronger." "I've always been strong, Ryan. You just couldn't see it because you weren't looking." He nodded, accepting the gentle rebuke. "The car really means that much to you?" I considered the question carefully. "It's not about the car itself. It's what it represents. But if returning it helps close this chapter of our lives cleanly, I can let it go." Relief flickered across his face. "Thank you. And Jess? I really am sorry. For everything. As apologies." Went. It was vague but sincere. I accepted it with a nod, knowing better than to expect a detailed acknowledgement of every way he had failed me. This was as close to closure as we were likely to get. Outside the law firm's offices, Linda was waiting by the elevator. "That went better than expected," she said as we rode down to the lobby. "They caved on almost every point. Whatever leverage you have over Walter Mitchell, it must be significant." I smiled. "Let's just say I did my homework. But you're right. They were surprisingly reasonable. I suspect they want this resolved before Patricia discovers they've been negotiating." Linda laughed. "Smart money says she finds out before the final paperwork is signed. Be prepared for one last offensive." "I'm always prepared," I assured her. "But honestly, I think Walter and Ryan are tired of fighting. Patricia may be the only one still out for blood." As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rang with an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Jessica Harmon?" A woman's voice, unfamiliar. Speaking. "This is Evelyn Clark from Clark Realty. I'm calling about the Madison Park property. I understand it will be coming on the market soon? I frowned, exchanging a confused glance with Linda. We had just agreed to list the house, not more than an hour ago. There hadn't been time for word to spread to real estate agents. That's correct, but we haven't selected a listing agent yet. How did you hear about this? Patricia Mitchell referred me, the woman said cheerfully. She mentioned you were in a hurry to sell and suggested I reach out directly. I have several clients actively looking in that neighborhood who might be interested in a private sale, which could save you the hassle of listing. I felt a chill run down my spine. Patricia knew about the settlement terms. Somehow, she'd found out what we'd agreed to and was already moving to insert herself into the process. I see, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Thank you for your interest, Ms. Clark, but we'll be following a more traditional listing process. Have a good day. I hung up and immediately called Linda's attention to what had happened. Patricia knows. She's already trying to control the house sale. Linda's expression hardened. That was fast, even for her. Someone in that room must have tipped her off immediately after we reached agreement. My money's on Blackwell, I said. He probably called her the minute he stepped out. This complicates things, Linda acknowledged. If Patricia is actively working to undermine the settlement before it's even finalized, we need to move quickly. I'll have the formal documents drawn up by end of day and delivered to Lancaster for signature first thing tomorrow. I nodded, my mind racing with implications. And I need to secure the Madison Park house. Change the locks. Install a security system if necessary. I wouldn't put it past Patricia to try something more direct. Linda raised an eyebrow. You think she'd go that far? I think Patricia Mitchell considers herself at war. And in war, there are few rules she won't break to win. By the time I reached my condo, I had calls from 3 more real estate agents, all referred by Patricia, all suggesting private sales to interested parties they represented. I ignored them all. Whatever game Patricia was playing, I had no intention of participating. I grabbed my briefcase and headed right back out. I needed to visit the Madison Park house, ensure it was secure, perhaps remove anything of value I hadn't already taken. If Patricia was making moves regarding the house, I couldn't afford to leave it unattended. As I drove, I called Marcus. I need a favor, I said when he answered. Do you know any good security companies? Ones that could install a system today? What's happened? He asked, immediately alert. I explained the situation briefly. I know exactly who to call, he assured me. My buddy runs Elite Guard Security. They specialize in high-end residential systems. I'll have him meet you at the house in an hour. And Jess? I'm coming too. No arguments. I started to protest but stopped myself. This wasn't about pride or independence. If Patricia was escalating matters, having backup was simply prudent. Thank you, I said instead. I appreciate it. When I arrived at the Madison Park house, everything looked normal from the outside. The lawn was slightly overgrown. Neither Ryan nor I had been maintaining it since our separation, but otherwise the property appeared undisturbed. I used my key to enter, half expecting to find Patricia inside, but the house was empty and silent. I moved from room to room, checking for any signs of intrusion or disturbance. Everything seemed to be in order, though the place felt sterile. Now, a stage set rather than a home. I was gathering some remaining paperwork from the office when the doorbell rang. Marcus stood on the porch with another man, presumably his security expert friend. Jess, this is Dave Ellison of Elite Guard. Dave, Jessica Harmon. Dave was a former military type, all efficiency and understated competence. Ms. Harmon, Marcus filled me in on the situation. I'll do a property assessment and can have a full security system installed within 3 hours. Motion sensors, cameras, remote monitoring, the works. That would be wonderful, I said, relieved. Cost isn't an issue. While Dave began his assessment, Marcus and I sat in the kitchen, the only room in the house that still felt vaguely welcoming. So they caved on nearly everything, Marcus said after I'd filled him in on the settlement conference. That's a win, isn't it? It should be, I agreed. But Patricia clearly isn't on board, and she has ways of making trouble. The real estate agent's calling me. That's just the beginning. She's sending a message. What message is that? That nothing happens without her approval. That even if Walter and Ryan are ready to settle, she's still in control. Marcus frowned. But legally, she has no standing in your divorce. She's not a party to it. Legally, no. But Patricia's power has never been about legal standing. It's about influence, manipulation, social pressure. She's built her entire identity around controlling her family and their image. My leaving Ryan standing up to her, it threatens everything she's constructed. So, what's your next move? I considered the question carefully. Secure this house. Get the settlement signed before she can derail it. And prepare for whatever she might do next. And the car? You're really going to give it back to Ryan? I smiled slightly. The car served its purpose. It was never about ownership. It was about making a statement. That statement's been made. I don't need the car anymore. Marcus seemed unconvinced. It feels like you're letting them win on that point. Sometimes winning isn't about keeping everything. It's about choosing your battles wisely and walking away with what truly matters. I gestured around us. This house, beautiful as it is, it's full of memories I'd rather leave behind. The car, too. My freedom, my reputation, my financial security, those are worth fighting for. The rest is just stuff. Dave returned from his assessment, interrupting our conversation. Good news and bad news, he said briskly. Good news is I can secure this place properly. We'll have a team here within the hour. Bad news is someone's already been inside. I straightened in. Alarm. What? When? Recently, Dave said. Within the last day or two. Professional job. They picked the back door lock. Wouldn't have noticed except I checked these things specifically. They were careful. Didn't disturb anything obvious. But they definitely entered the property. Marcus and I exchanged concerned glances. Can you tell what they were looking for? I asked. Dave shook his head. Can't say for sure, but if I had to guess, information. People who break in this carefully usually want documents, access to computers, that sort of thing. My mind raced, considering what might have been the target. My financial records? Evidence of the loans to Ryan? Or was it something else entirely? Something I hadn't even considered? I need to call Linda, I said, reaching for my phone. She needs to know about this. As I dialed, I moved to the window, gazing out at the peaceful neighborhood that had once felt like home. Whatever game Patricia was playing, whatever her end game might be, one thing was clear. This wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. By noon, Walter and Ryan had signed the settlement agreement, accepting all my terms, including the clause about the break-in. Patricia was notably absent from the signing, and despite the settlement, she was proceeding with her press conference, a clear sign she wasn't done fighting. I decided to attend, not to confront her, but simply to be present. My existence alone would challenge her carefully constructed narrative. Marcus met me outside Mitchell Investments headquarters. We positioned ourselves where Patricia would see me but couldn't easily have me removed without creating a scene. When she took the podium to announce her ethics and finance initiative, her practiced smile faltered momentarily upon spotting me in the crowd. In today's investment landscape, Patricia proclaimed, we see too many instances where personal connections trump sound financial analysis, where relationships are leveraged for gain in ways that undermine the integrity of our business community. The irony was perfect. Patricia positioning herself as an ethics champion, while her family had just signed documents retracting similar accusations against me. When she paused, I raised my hand politely. Unable to ignore me without seeming rude, Patricia acknowledged me. I apologize for the interruption, I said clearly, but as someone deeply committed to ethical investment practices, I wanted to express my support for such an important initiative. I believe ethical transparency should extend to all business practices, don't you? Including family investment structures and tax strategies. The color drained from Patricia's face as I continued. I'm pleased to see the Mitchell family taking such a public stance on ethics, especially given the settlement. Papers signed this morning affirming my professional integrity and withdrawing all previous allegations against me. The reporters immediately perked up. This wasn't the story they'd expected. Question after question focused on the settlement and retracted allegations. Patricia's carefully crafted image crumbled with each evasion until Walter finally ended the press conference abruptly. That afternoon, I returned the Aston Martin to the dealership. It had served its purpose, and I was ready for something that represented my future, not my past. 3 months later, standing in my Capitol Hill condo watching the sunset, I reflected on how much had changed. The Madison Park house had sold, the divorce was final, and I'd used part of my settlement to establish a scholarship for young women in finance. Walter had retired from Mitchell Investments. Ryan had emailed once, thanking me for how I'd handled everything and wishing me well. And Patricia had retreated from the public eye, her carefully constructed social image severely damaged. As I prepared for a dinner date with Marcus, I caught my reflection in the mirror. There was a confidence in my eyes that hadn't been there before, a certainty about who I was and what I deserved. Worthless, I murmured, remembering Ryan's cruel words that had changed everything. How wrong he had been. How wrong I had been to let anyone else define my value for so long. I had lost a husband but found myself. I had walked away from wealth and status, but gained true independence. I had been called worthless and discovered I was priceless. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.